Welcome back to the Ed Morrissey Show. Joining us, as always, on Tuesdays, Andrew Malcolm, the Prince of Twitter, the Regent of RedState.com, at AH Malcolm on the Twitters. We don't call it X here because we're old fogies. And Andrew's going, speak for yourself, Morrissey. How are you, sir?
I'm good. And you?
I'm doing good. I mean, got tons of things to talk about, and all sorts of times, all sorts of time to do it in. You've got a good post up, and we're going to get to this in just a second because it kind of relates to the first thing I want to talk about. I talk about media and media bias.
Yeah.
So the Washington Post. Actually, there were two big media polls that came out over the weekend. The first one was from the Washington Post and ABC News. It's a joint effort between the two. They've been partnered for 20 years, as far as I know, maybe more, on polling. Second one came out from NBC News. They both basically said the same thing, though, that a large majority of Americans don't think that Joe Biden is up to doing the job.
Yeah.
And that Donald Trump has either caught up to him or has surpassed him. Now, I got to tell you, I'm not necessarily
and Nikki Haley too.
And Nikki Haley. I'm not necessarily convinced by the horse race aspects of this because we're still, 13 months out from a decision. People got a long time to make up their minds on this stuff. But I was surprised by the way the Washington Post actually handled this news. Most pollsters, Andrew, will go out of their way to tell you, no, our methodology is rock solid, and this is maybe it's just a snapshot of where the American public is at, but this is data that you can actually rely on. The Washington Post normally would do that as well, but they kind of went a different way on this one. I
guess
they expressly called the results an outlier in regards to Trump, right?
Yeah. What did they say about Trump?
That Trump was ahead of Biden by 10 points.
10 points, yeah.
10 points, yeah. And that's an outlier, which is true. It is kind of an outlier, but you don't normally hear that from the pollster. You hear it from analysts who are looking at the poll numbers. I mean, it's right there in the Washington Post's own report on their own poll. Yeah, well, this is what we came up with, and by golly, we don't trust it.
Well, one, they wouldn't want to hear it. So it's to their advantage politically to say that, don't pay attention. The weird thing, as you point out, is that don't pay attention to us, even though we just spent a fortune for you to pay attention to us. Ron Fascio, who is a polling expert, and he puts out a regular analysis, he said the same thing, but then he said, then since you're dumping on your own poll, do it again.
I mean, and again, I mean, if you don't think that your poll
was do it
properly, well, why publish the results? Why not just say, hey, we did this poll, but we think that we screwed this thing up, so we're not going to publish the results?
Well, I think if word got out that they didn't publish it, then they would be blamed because it was bad news for Biden. They didn't publish it. So
it is a catch-22. It is a catch-22. Yeah.
Well, once you do it, you have to say it. But you could also do another one, and then if the new one is the same thing, you could say, "Wow, we're onto something here that other people haven't found." If it says what everybody else is saying, then you could say, "Well, we did an outlier, and because we didn't trust it, we did another one." I mean, that's what you would do. But the Post is in financial trouble, so they're saving money.
Are me shocked at that? I mean, it's a newspaper. I mean, they're just it's not a very solid,
And they lost. I think was it last year or that second half of last year or sometime soon, recently they lost 500,000 digital subscribers. And I mean, there's been a lot of turmoil since Trump left, which shows to me how much they were relying on Trump and Trump hatred in their business operations. Washington Post was the one that did almost daily counting of Trump lies. They haven't got around to do that for Joe yet. But they are in financial trouble, and Jeff Bezos, he's started showing up at some meetings at the Post now. So I wish him well. We need a strong media, but strong media, today's strong medias they're not strong because they've lost so much of their credibility by giving up on their alleged objectivity. Total objectivity is impossible, but professional objectivity, yeah, you can work on it. I did it. I did that. You
Sure.
wouldn't know. You wouldn't know who I voted for, according to the political stories that I wrote on the New York Times all those years.
Well, you know, I did happen to go through your thing and the whole Michael Dukakis as a duty head. I thought that was a really interesting. I'm just kidding. He never wrote that. I am just kidding.
Yeah, let's see. That would have been 88. Where was I?
Were you still at the Times in '88?
Yeah, yes, I was. I was at the Times until 93. 88. Yeah, I probably did some stuff in there. I went to the Times, it's digitalized archive all the way back in the 1850s or 60s.
Very useful, by the way, and it's a lot of fun to dig through some of that stuff.
Oh,
If
it's
you got
wonderful.
a lot of time on your hands. This is what I did in the entire last year. I was actually attending college. I won't say it was my last year of college because so one of the reasons why I didn't graduate was because I was they had a microfilm library of
the microfilm. Yeah, that's
several different newspapers, including the Los Angeles Times, I think the Santa Ana Register.
Oh yeah, that's a big
and so I mean I was going through these records just for the sake of going through them because I thought it was so fascinating. And now you can do digitally at the New York Times, which is actually it is actually a pretty cool perk of having a New York Times subscription.
Boy, I'll say, yeah, and when I looked up my bylines, and if you do Andrew H. Malcolm, there's like over 5,000 of them. Yeah, I'm trying to pull out the ones I like and put them on a thumb drive.
Well, I mean, and again, it's easy to do that now. You can get lost in doing that. You can spend hours, weeks.
Oh, absolutely,
or
absolutely.
semesters.
And and it's funny because some of the stories that I come and say, "What? That I have no memory of that one." And other stories you read, and it's like, "Yeah, well, okay." And then you read it and you go, "Oh yeah, that wasn't really bad, was it?"
Yeah. Well, look,
Yeah,
I'm coming up on 20 years doing this, right?
yeah, yeah.
That's next week. It's a week from today. We're recording this on Monday, the 25th. And a week from today will be my 20-year anniversary in the blogosphere.
Wow.
And every once in a while, I like to go dipping back into the old captain's quarters archives to take a look at what I wrote back then and how my style has changed. And it's kind of interesting to do that too.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah, good stuff. Well, that's how I met you. And whenever I whenever I go to type an email for you, it offers me the Captain Quarters email.
Which still works, by the way. It still works.
Oh, does it?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, I've only
probably piled up
my emails. Well, I've only turned off a couple of my emails, and only because one of them got to be so filled with spam that I just decided to delete it. And the other one was literally it had a domain name for an internet service that I stopped using. I can't even remember. It was something Quest. It was Quest.
Quest. Oh,
and so which used to be Mountain Bell, I think, at one point. And yeah, so I mean, yeah, I don't usually kill those. I usually keep them around just in case I get a stray email from somebody that I really want to hear from. But yeah, that one I actually get quite a bit of email still on. So yeah, that's coming up in a week, and I'm going to write something up. I think either this week or maybe for next Monday.
Oh, that'd be cool. That. Yeah, congratulations, 20 years. Let's see. So that was 03. Yep. Yeah, well, I didn't come upon you for a couple of years after that, but
I think we started corresponding in 2006 or 2007. It was right before I went to Hot Air, and then when we finally met in person was at the convention, and that
Yeah.
was 2008. I was writing for Hot Air at that point in time.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And you know,
2008.
in all that time, this is the first time I've ever seen a pollster call their own outcome an outlier. But hey, you know,
Who
gotta
are we?
protect Biden.
Who are we to judge?
Well,
Hmm.
and the reason why is because both polls, both the ABC WaPo poll and the NBC poll, show that the American electorate is very concerned about the compos mentis state of the commander in chief. Right? You have
Yeah, well,
in
how
the
could they not be? Yeah, the
how could
evidence
that
is
be?
so
Yeah,
the evidence is so overwhelming
this is
and
what you were
so
writing about. Yeah.
yeah, and so persistent. I mean, the guy every time he comes out, there's something new. Now, I admit human beings are now looking for it. But you know, the White House even last week, I think it was, had to change the official transcript of something he said because it was not true.
Yeah.
Yeah, but of
Surprised me.
course they don't announce it; they just change it.
Well, that's sort of following the media
Yeah.
ethics rules these days too. They make corrections without noting the corrections, which is, you know, bad. It's bad ethical practice, but more and more media outlets have been doing that. But I mean, in your column, and I think that this is true to an extent. You say the problem isn't Biden's age, it's his mind. And
Yeah.
I agree with that to a point, right? But I think that if
You
you're
better.
Andrew has the prince has spoken. But I think that it's worth considering when you go to the ballot box. If the guy you're voting for is, you know, older than rock and roll,
Yeah.
maybe it's not a great idea to cast a ballot for him, especially if he's in a singular leadership role. But that's even true for the Senate, and I'd argue for the House. You know, that maybe that's something that really should come under
Well,
consideration.
Biden was born 11 months after Pearl Harbor, and he will be the last president born before the end of World War II. And it, you can have, I mean, Henry Kissinger is still pretty sharp, and he's what, 100 or 99? So you can be old and still be sharp. I don't know if you're up to being president or not, but you can be old and be pretty sharp. But Biden, he provides proof every day, virtually, that he isn't up to it. He's old, which, okay, but he's not up to it. And the evidence was there during the 2020 campaign, but too many people hated Trump so much they voted for Biden without really thinking about it, without really looking at him. The guy who's in Iowa and talks about Ohio, a guy who's calling people names in town hall meetings, the guy who's telling a black that if you don't vote for me, you're not black. The guy who's calling what do you call him when at the end of the day calling anyway, the guy who stops working at 10:30, they're on the
Oh, putting a
during
lid on it. Yeah,
a
he's
lid
putting
on, put
a
a
lid
lid
at
on
10:30 in the morning.
at 10:30 in the morning. I said, and Trump is out, who's only he's less than 4 years younger, and Trump is out there doing 3 and 4 rallies in as many states.
Yep.
And that's the thing. People say, well, Trump is almost as old. I say, well, he doesn't act it, and that was my point in the column. Was you can be 80 and sharp as a tack, and you can be 80 and like Biden, you're half gone. And he gives all the signals of being at least half gone. And I mean, that's scary. That is really scary. When my grandfather, who had a hardening of the arteries, he would be teaching me to whittle or how to take care of livestock or something. And then all of a sudden he would be very angry and shouting at me and so on. And 10 minutes later, he would come and apologize because his wife had told him to. He had no memory of that.
Yeah.
And I think many Americans have had that experience with family members, whether it's at Thanksgiving or other times, where someone will say something that they just know is not true.
Right. And that's the reason why, 74% of voters in this NBC poll had either moderate or major concerns about his health,
Yeah,
his mental and
absolutely.
physical health. 59% major concerns. It would be
And
one thing if it was the other way around. 15% had major concerns, 59 had
yeah,
moderate concerns. Then you put him out there a few times, show him in, vigor and vim and all that kind of stuff, and maybe you alleviate some of that. But this is 59%. A clear and bipartisan majority of Americans
yeah,
are very concerned that this guy isn't up to the task now, let alone for another 4 years at the end of this term.
yeah. Can you imagine 86?
Biden? No, he'll never make it.
Well, that's the question. In fact, I did a post at Red State, I think it was last year, saying, forget about the election. Can he even make it to the election? I mean, forget about 2029. Can he even make it to this election?
Right.
Uh, and he, I mean, everybody tells white lies or fibs, or as Mark Twain called it, stretchers. Everybody does that. I think almost everybody, maybe not you, Ed, because
Ronald Reagan used to tell tall tales, but not self-aggrandizing tall tales.
yeah, there's a big difference. Yeah,
There's a big difference. Yeah.
But Biden keeps telling what utterly obviously fictitious lies about his life. I mean, he did not have a career as an 18-wheel driver. He just did not. He was not. He
Absurd.
was.
An
He
absurd
was.
idea.
I know he was not raised by Jews or Puerto Ricans. His son didn't die in Iraq. I mean, there's just so many things. His house didn't nearly burn down. It was a 20-minute kitchen fire. And but he not only does he tell them, he keeps telling them, even after people go, that's not true. And that, I think, I mean, everybody, I think, at least suspects that people, especially politicians, tell fibs or lies at times. But Biden tells them so often, so obviously crap, that you forget about the untruth of it, and you go, wait a minute, something's wrong inside that head, because he just keeps on doing it. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. And he's just telling these stories, whatever comes to his mind. And there's not much of that left.
Yeah,
So,
and he's always been a liar. He's always been
Yeah.
a pathological liar about this stuff. He's always been a guy who plumps himself up with outrageous lies. I mean, this is a guy who, 36 years ago was claiming Neil Kinnock's life as his own, right? I mean, he was listening Neil Kinnock's speeches, including the the biographical information, and saying these things aloud, knowing full well that it was horse crap, right?
Right. Yeah.
And then he got caught, by the way, by none other than your at the time colleague E.J. Dionne, when he was at the New York Times, and got caught also in some other lies. And then he also had this really stupid, confrontation with the guy who challenged him on some point. It was in a bar or some campaign stop, and Joe Biden gets pugilistic with the guy and wants to compare IQs and tells a whole series of lies. I had a full scholarship to law school. I graduated in the top 10% of my class. He didn't even crack the top half of his class. And there's a reason why, because he's an idiot.
Yeah. And you have to think, if you get caught once or twice, but then you keep on doing it, and not only keep on telling these ridiculous lies, but keep on telling the same ridiculous lies. You've been called out and you're doing it again. And then people say, well, okay, never mind that he had a career as a truck driver, or that he was accepted to the Naval Academy. he keeps doing it. And that tells you there's something off in that head. Plus the fact you just watch him walk. Now, there's nothing wrong. I haven't, because I don't have access to the nuclear launch codes. People don't watch how I walk that closely, but I probably walk differently at my age than I did 40 years ago. So what? I'm not president, and I'm not allegedly leading the free world. And so then you have to think about, okay, there's something wrong in his mind. Then you have to think about the ethics of the people around him, including his wife, who are perpetuating the fiction that he could be president for their own reasons. That's because they don't want to lose power. They like living in government housing. So and it has sunk in. There are enough examples, even though the media doesn't point them out as much as they would if it was a Republican. There are enough examples out there where people are kind of like, ooh, and I mean, everybody falls down. Older people, that's the leading cause of older people dying, is falling down. And who was it? Somebody just died. Think of it. Somebody prominent just died after they hit their head falling down. Forget who it was, but it's scary, is what it is.
It's scary because this is a person. It's problematic when you have Senator Dianne Feinstein, who's clearly not up to the job. It's bad enough when you had Strom Thurmond, who was basically, and Robert Byrd, so we'll make it bipartisan, who are basically being weakened at Bernie's, by their aides on stuff for at least the last couple of years that they were in the Senate. That's bad enough, but all of the executive authority is in the hands of one person.
And
if that person is incompetent or incapacitated, that's an issue. I mean, it is a big issue. And again, Joe Biden has always been an incompetent. Joe Biden has always been a liar. Now it doesn't look like he is. It looks like he's not even in full control of his faculties anymore. And I mean, this is, I mean, maybe the only parallel that comes to mind, and I hesitate to use it because everybody talks about Nazi Germany in terms of parallels, and I don't mean it in terms of Nazism, but when Hindenburg became mentally weak, let's say, basically was becoming senile, that's when the Nazis were able to take control because they could get around Hindenburg. That's in part. I mean, that's only part of it. And I even hesitate to do that. It's just the only thing that comes to mind. Maybe a better analogy. And I'll stick with this one. I'll ask people to forgive that analogy because it's not a great analogy.
No, most people don't even remember who Hindenburg was. Yeah, go ahead.
They remember it was a blimp or a Zeppelin.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Oh, that's the guy who was named after the blimp. Yeah.
Right, exactly. But maybe Wilson is a better example. Incapacitated in his final, year and a half in office, and the presidency was being run by his wife and his aides, in his name. It was a protectorate. That's dangerous. It might turn out well, but only by accident would it turn out well. And the only reason you might say that it could turn out well is because it's really difficult to conceive of a worse president than Joe Biden has been. I mean, you really almost have nowhere to go but up. I mean, I'm crossing my fingers on that one, but you probably only have nowhere to go but up with that. But I mean, the guy's an utter disaster, and that's what these polls are showing. And the Washington Post doesn't want to deal with the implications of that, nor the implications that you lay out in your column. And so they're declaring their poll an outlier so that they don't have to discuss those implications.
Yeah,
that's they're trying to spin this away because this is the Protection Racket Media, and they're circling wagons around Joe Biden
and Kamala Harris.
Okay.
Nikki Haley to my mind, is making very strong points on the campaign trail, saying, a vote for Joe Biden next year is a vote for Kamala Harris, because I don't think hardly anybody, they may wish Joe Biden stays alive, but I don't think many people expect that he would stay alive. as a president until or until 2029. Yeah, until 1929. Yeah.
Yeah, 1929. That's when Joe Biden said that FDR went on television to reassure, President
Oh,
FDR went
what
on
a
television
memory. That's right. That's right.
to
Exactly
assure
right.
Americans after the stock market crash. Yeah, FDR, President Roosevelt went on television in 1929 to soothe the yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yet another early sign that maybe this guy wasn't really up to the job. All right, I gotta speaking about not being up to the job. We gotta talk about this before we run out of time. Robert Menendez,
Oh my.
apparently not satisfied with managing to get away with with corruption the first time around, turned around and started doing the same damn thing all over again, only apparently on a more industrial scale, at least according to the Department of Justice.
Industrial scale of corruption.
Oh my gosh, he got his wife to set up some sort of fake consultancy. Um, he was getting gold bars. The FBI raided his house. Did you see the pictures?
I didn't see the pictures, but I heard about the raid. Yeah.
Okay, so we got the pictures are in the indictment. You can go through the indictment, or it's in one of the attachments to the indictment, I believe. And they got pictures of wads of cash stuffed into jackets in his house with his name embroidered on them. So it's not like, oh, somebody may have left that there in my house. And I just
somebody stuffed my jackets with $500,000. What can I do?
$500,000 gold bars, right? In the house. So, you've got people saying, well, maybe you should step down, Senator, because this is looking pretty ugly. And, today he came out and he was very defiant about this, saying he's not going to step down. He didn't do anything wrong. Did you hear any part of his presser today?
No.
Because you're gonna love the excuse that he uses. If you
Go
haven't,
ahead. Go ahead.
all right. He claims that the reason why there was $480,000 in cash around his house, right, is because his family had their property seized by the Cubans before they fled. And he's very concerned about that something like that might happen here. Now, last I looked, this isn't Cuba, first off. And secondly, do you know where and when Robert Menendez was actually born?
Go ahead. Jersey?
Yeah, close. 1954, New York City. He was never in Cuba. His parents did emigrate to the United States a year before, right? So
listen to it. And he heard the stories.
Yeah, apparently. So, I mean, basically, he pulled out the Fulgencio Batista card.
Boy, you're on today.
Oh my gosh. Batista was not a nice guy. Okay. Batista was a tyrant. Okay. He was the dictator, so was Castro. It was just one flavor to another, in the name of liberation. But, and the thing is that there are actually two different distinct Cuban communities in Florida. And I didn't know this until I went down there to, ask these questions. But there's actually a fairly significant community of Batista refugees and their descendants in Florida who look at politics regarding Cuba a little differently than the Castro refugees do. They tend to be a little bit more liberal than Batista refugees do. Not entirely so. There's a lot of commonality, but they have a slightly different orientation. You have to know that when you go down there to make sure that you're not giving the wrong message to the wrong group of people, like Joe Biden obviously would. He'd actually talk about the southern border to Cubans.
Yeah.
Which
he would be alone. Yeah. And those Cubans, they may have slightly dark skin, but they're pretty smart for Cubans.
Well, they're a hell of a lot smarter than Robert Menendez is, apparently, because I mean, this is not only a ludicrous explanation for having wads of cash stuffed into your jacket. It's not only obviously contradictory, because the only way that federal agents seize money is when they find wads of cash. They don't seize them out of bank accounts unless they have a really clear evidence of the bank accounts being used for criminal purposes. But if you go anywhere with wads of cash or they find wads of cash, what's the first thing they're going to do? They're going to seize the cash until you can demonstrate that you came by this through normal channels, right? That it's legal money and that you've paid taxes on it and the whole bit. So I mean, it's a stupid explanation, but also it may have escaped his attention, Andrew.
Yeah.
But he's actually going to have to go to trial now, and he's basically staked out his defense on that. On that, he's admitting that he did it, and if he can't come up with where that money came from, including the gold bars, his new attorney Abby Lowell is going to have a hell of a tough time.
Oh my gosh.
Oh wow. I mean,
Yeah.
Lowell's a hell of an attorney. He really is. He got Menendez off the first time. That's how good an attorney Abby Lowell is.
What was the charge the first time?
It was similar types of charges. It was influence peddling. He was supposedly intervening with Medicare on behalf of Solomon. I can't think of the guy's name. He's an ophthalmologist. He's a Medicare ophthalmologist, and he had like millions. He had defrauded Medicare of millions of dollars in Florida, right? And supposedly he ran interference for him, and they were flying to the Dominican Republic together, and the doctor was partying with underage hookers. They never actually were able to prove that Menendez took part in that, but Menendez was also on the one of the apparently frequent flyers on the Jeffrey Epstein Lolita Express. So,
Oh yeah. Well, okay. Well, yeah, but innocent. I mean, there's really nothing to prove that he had. Somebody put it there.
Somebody put $480,000 worth of cash in the jackets with his name embroidered on it.
And boy, did those bars pull the jackets off the hanger.
They did. It kind of ruins the shape. I don't like.
Yeah, it does. It does.
My sport coat, it sort of ruins the shaping. So
that's what I heard. I haven't. Don't look in my closet, Ed.
I can tell you that from personal experience, having hung my full bars in my sport coat pockets. Don't do that. It's bad. Put it in your members only jacket if you have those left over from the 1980s. And nobody does. Yeah. I mean, and by the way, whoever is the WaPo cash fairy that has been visiting Menendez, feel free to drop by my house too. You want to drop a few $100,000 worth of cash. I'm fine with that. I got lots of jackets.
It'll be safe with me. Oh my gosh.
Well, yeah, that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. We're just about out of time though. I mean, we had to talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's a good one.
Do you think that he'll resign? He's insisting that he won't resign today. I suspect that he's going to try to cut a deal because, I mean, I don't think he wants this to go to trial. He's going to have to cut some sort of a deal that's going to require him to step down from office. You see that Democrats have recruited Andy Kim to run in the primary in case Menendez won't get out. And Andy Kim is a comer. He's been in Congress for 3 terms. He's well known. He raises money. And Democrats have been looking at him as the future anyway from New Jersey. And the future, I think, just arrived.
It's here now. Is Menendez term up next year?
Yeah, he has to run in 2024. So I mean, the primary is going to come up here sometime next year. I forget when New Jersey has theirs. I think it's later in the cycle, if I remember correctly. But their primary for the Senate offices might be different than their presidential primary. Sometimes states have 2 different ones. I'm not sure what it is, but at any rate, Kim has already announced that he's going to run for the office. He's going to run in the primary. I think Democrats wanted to get that out there right away to keep a whole bunch of other people from jumping into the race. They want a clean transition if they can get it.
A funny little historical story.
Yeah.
That's how Donald Rumsfeld got into the House the first time. He told friends he was going to run, and they said, "Oh no, this guy, whoever was the incumbent in Evanston on the North Shore," he said, "No, he's been there forever." And 2 weeks after Rumsfeld announced, that guy was indicted, and that's how Rumsfeld began his career, and the rest is history.
Well, yeah. Yeah. I mean, sometimes, I mean, AOC took out a guy who was in Democratic leadership.
Yeah.
Joe Crowley, I think, was, and you know, sometimes you get surprised by this. This is not going to be a surprise. I don't think Menendez has got a base any longer. I think after this, people are going to be saying, you know, it's time to move on from this guy. There was an interesting article over at American Prospect, not a magazine I often read. American Prospect is somewhat to the left of Bernie Sanders most of the time, but it's got some intelligent, you know, writers. David Dayen is the guy that I was reading over there, and basically he's in this article, and I had it in the headlines. It will have already been up. It's called "Breaking the Menendez Cycle." He's indicted for public corruption. He beats the charges thanks to the Supreme Court. Democrats restore him to a position of power, and he's indicted again. But this time, Democrats aren't as welcoming. I call this the "fool me once, shame on you; fool me twice." ...
Yeah.
You know, function of politics. Yeah, I don't think they want to keep going around the bend with this guy because they don't need to. New Jersey's pretty solidly blue,
Yeah.
and Andy Kim can win that seat pretty easily in a general election. And I think that that's what they're planning to do. But Diane's right. If they hadn't allowed him back inside the fold, they wouldn't have to be dealing with this now. And yeah, it's
Well, he must have something on Schumer or the others too. Have let him back, and now they can tell him, no, sorry, Bob,
yeah.
you're out of here.
Solomon Melgen, that was the name of the doctor.
Oh, I remember that name.
Yeah, and it wasn't just the Medicare thing. He had intervened with the State Department to get him a port security contract in the Dominican Republic, and then there was the issue that Melgen was defrauding Medicare. So
Yeah, well, yeah. Well, that'll spoil your day. Jeez.
All right, well, we're almost out of time here, a little overtime probably.
Well, I got a couple.
I got a couple short ones. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Conan O'Brien, this is an old one. He says, yesterday a news anchor accidentally hung up on Oprah Winfrey while he was interviewing her. He is survived by his wife and children. And I got one. This is funny. This one has been going around on TikTok and Facebook, and it's just funny. It's a story about a wife. It says to her husband, "Our new neighbors are so in love. He kisses her, strokes her hair, and hugs her. Why don't you do that?" And the husband says, "Because I don't know her that well." That's a great answer.
Yeah, that is a very good answer. All right, I got a couple for you. You know, I took my dog to the park the other day to play frisbee with him, and he was utterly useless. I think I need a flatter dog. And this is from jokesoftheday.net. I always like to give credit. Jokesoftheday.net. You know, I phoned my wife earlier and asked her if she wanted me to pick up fish and chips on my way home from work, but you know, she just kind of gave me this really odd, angry grunt. I think she still regrets letting me name the twins. All right. Well, on those notes.
Oh boy. There was something I saw today on Twitter. It was a guy said, "I'm going to name my new son Physics so I can be the father of physics."
Yeah, that's certainly one with it. I had this really long joke once. Well, I'll tell it really quickly. I'll try to shorten it up. Is this, you know, this guy's driving his very pregnant wife who's going into labor into the hospital. They get in a car wreck, and both of them are in the hospital. And he wakes up, and it's about a week later, and he asks the doctor, "What happened to my wife?" He says, "Don't worry, she's fine. you know, she was unconscious for 3 or 4 days, but we were able to deliver the babies. You had twins, and they're fine too. He goes, oh, good. He goes, yeah. The doctor said, yeah, but you know, I got to tell you, you know, state law requires us to get a name, and we had to go to the next of kin to choose the name for your children because you both were incapacitated. He goes, wait a minute, who did you talk to? He says, well, I talked to your wife's brother. He goes, oh God, not my idiot brother-in-law, not my idiot brother-in-law, anybody but him. He said, well, I'm sorry, but you know, he was the only one who was available. And he said, all right, well, he says, well, what did he name him? And he says, well, he named the girl Denise. And he says, oh, actually, I like that name. Denise is a really pretty name. And he goes, well, what do you name this, the boy? He goes, well, the nephew.
Actually, that's a good one. That's a good one to end on. Yeah.
There you go, Denise and the nephew. All right, Andrew Malcolm, the prince of Twitter, the regent of redstate.com, and a man who laughs at my jokes.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah.
So that's priceless in my book. At AH Malcolm on Twitter. And of course, redstate.com is where you can find everything that Andrew's writing. Andrew, thank you so much. We'll talk again next week.
You will. See you, everybody. Thanks.